Welcome back to the S&T Football Podcast. I'm your man Say, and today I want to talk about the NFL Draft. The NFL Draft just wrapped up this past week, and we saw a lot of names get called during the draft. We saw some interesting moves being made, some interesting draft picks here and there. There was a couple storylines that were very entertaining to follow during this draft. Now, in my personal opinion, I think last year's draft was a lot more interesting. I was definitely locked in last year way more than I was this year. This year, I feel like the draft class in general was kind of weak. I think there was a lot of good players, a lot of good talent that was picked, but, just like the superstar, type guys that we see coming out of college, like the Travis Hunters of last year, you know what I mean? Like it didn't really have that kind of hype this season. Nevertheless, the NFL draft was very interesting, and now we see the big changes really coming into fold in the NFL because there's going to be a lot of, new faces this coming season. And in this episode, I wanted to talk about the quarterbacks that were selected in the NFL draft. I'm always very interested in seeing what college quarterbacks come out of college and go to NFL teams, just because, a lot of these guys in reality will never be, starting caliber, star, top level type guys. A lot of them, that had a lot of success at the college level, will not translate that to the NFL. We see it all the time, a lot of big names that were great at the college level don't really have what it takes to make it to the NFL. Just go back to, Johnny Manziel. So that's why I like to talk about the quarterbacks because, it's very interesting to see the guys that, were the guys in college. They were the best of the best when it comes to quarterbacks in college. Now go to the NFL and, get their shot at the highest level. So I just want to go through the names of quarterbacks that were selected and dive into the different situations surrounding them and the teams that picked them. So, of course, we got to start off with Fernando Mendoza, quarterback out of Indiana. First overall, it was written into destiny very early on in the draft process, basically from the very moment that the college season ended and he won a national championship at Indiana. It was basically written in that he was going to go number one overall to the Raiders. The Las Vegas Raiders obviously are starving for a quarterback. They need one badly. They have not had a starting caliber quarterback since Derek Carr left years ago. Obviously, Derek Carr is retired now and moved on. And Geno Smith, who went over there last year, did not have a great year, so they released him immediately. So obviously looking for a quarterback, and that was the surefire pick right there. Considering the fact that this year's quarterback draft class is pretty weak, just like it was last season. There's some similarities, I believe, with the fact that there was really only two for sure guys this year, Fernando Mendoza and Ty Simpson. And that was kind of how it was last year as well, even though it didn't really go that way with Jackson Dart and Shedeur Sanders. But everyone going into the draft believed that those two guys were 1 and 2. Whichever order you wanted to put them in, most people believe they were 1 and 2. Just ask, what's his name with the hair? I can't think of his name right now, but, the guy that was the analyst that was going crazy last year for Shedeur Sanders. Obviously, Shedeur did not get picked as early as we projected him to. He ended up falling very late in the draft, but most people believe those guys were the top 2 guys in the draft, and the rest of the class was pretty weak, and same thing this year as well, as we see. So Fernando Mendoza goes first overall, national champion, Heisman Trophy winner. Number 1 overall in the draft. This guy is just doing it all. He's unstoppable. So coming over from Cal last year, transferred from Cal over to Indiana, and Indiana is a story in itself. One of the greatest stories we've ever seen in sports history, not just football, going from being one of the worst college football teams in the country for years and years and years, basically being irrelevant on the national stage, to making the playoff 2 years in a row and then winning a national championship last year. Just amazing. It still feels unreal. So a shout out to Fernando Mendoza going first overall in the draft to the Las Vegas Raiders. They'll always be the Oakland Raiders to me. The second quarterback taken was Ty Simpson, and this was probably the biggest storyline of the draft. Like I said, most people thought that these guys were 1 and 2, Mendoza and Ty Simpson, so it's not a surprise that he was the second quarterback taken. what was surprising about it was the fact that he went to the Rams at 13. I don't think most people thought that he was going to go this high. The Rams did trade up to get him as well, which was very surprising. And, that's probably been one of the biggest fallouts from the draft is everybody's clowning the Rams for this draft pick. Now, I am more optimistic about what the Rams are trying to do versus other people. I just believe that the Rams were late. I believe they were late on it. I believe they should have already got their guy like last year or the year before to take him to the future and take over for Matthew Stafford. Because as we know, Matthew Stafford just won an MVP. He is playing the best football he's ever played in his life. And I mean, he's been doing it. He's been balling for a long time now. So, but he is coming to the end. We don't know how long he's going to play. I mean, maybe he does like a Tom Brady and ends up playing till he's like 45. But, more likely than not, he's getting to the end, so he's almost 40 if he's not 40 already, turning 40 this year or something. So I believe the Rams should have done this like a year or two ago. I remember a year or two ago, I was thinking that the Rams should probably get ready to take their quarterback, considering the fact that Matthew was getting old and he was having injury problems and things like that. So I'm not surprised that they finally went and did it. So, I don't dog him for that because I think that's something they should have been thinking about earlier. And, they waited till now to do it. So, that's fine. I just think what most people don't like about the draft pick was that they took him this early and they traded up to get him, which, I do understand, especially with how this quarterback draft class was. I do believe that the Rams did not like the other names behind Ty Simpson, and they wanted a guy, you know what I mean? Like, they didn't want to leave this draft without getting a guy because, like I said, I think they should have thought about this last year or the year before. So it must have been on their mind, weighing on their mind this season, and they went ahead and did it. They went ahead and traded up and got their guy. Now, this draft pick right here reminds me of what the Packers have done in the past. Now, if you remember, this is kind of the Packers recipe. When the Packers had Brett Favre in his prime, they drafted Aaron Rodgers. When the Packers had Aaron Rodgers in his prime, playing at MVP levels, they drafted Jordan Love. And you see that the Packers, it has worked out for him. It may have not gotten them a Super Bowl in recent years. It hasn't been there for them since 2012, but that's kind of their recipe, and that's always kept them making the playoffs, year after year after year. They're always one of the best teams in the NFL. So obviously that recipe has worked out for the Green Bay Packers, and I don't fault the Los Angeles Rams for following that recipe as well. So shout out to Ty Simpson. He was a great quarterback at Alabama. 6'1", 211 pounds. He took Alabama to the playoff this past season. Won them a playoff game over my Oklahoma Sooners, and then ended up getting belt to ass versus Indiana. So a lot of connection there with him and Fernando. But this was a great situation for Ty. I mean, if you don't like the Rams draft pick, I mean, for Ty Simpson, this is about as best of a case that could have happened. Like getting drafted by a perennial Super Bowl contender. The Rams literally just made the NFC Championship game. So, this is the best case scenario for Ty Simpson. Now, what is interesting is that the Rams QB room already has Stetson Bennett, who is basically the second string, third string guy. They did have Jimmy Garoppolo as well, but it seems like Jimmy Garoppolo is going to retire. So Stetson Bennett, two-time national champion at Georgia. A lot of people like Stetson, and he's been kind of seen as like the protege under Matthew Stafford. Like he's going to take over for Matthew when Matthew goes. But it looks like the Rams had other ideas. So maybe the Rams don't like Stetson as much as we thought because they traded up in the first round to go get a guy. So Ty Simpson, welcome to Los Angeles. And I think the Rams will be fine. They're still going to be doing what they do. Should be another Super Bowl or bust run for them, but they're looking towards the future now. The third quarterback taken in the NFL draft. So this is where we didn't really know what was going to happen from this point on. We knew the first two guys were going to get taken 1 and 2. This year, it did happen as planned. And then everything after that, we were like, hey, we don't know who's going to be 3, 4, 5, who's going to get drafted, who's not going to get drafted. So this is where it really gets interesting for me as well. And then we're also going to get into Diego Pavia later on with the undrafted guys. So Diego Pavia being a big story around the draft as well. So the third quarterback taken in the draft, Carson Beck out of Miami. Yes, Carson Beck, the first pick of the third round to the Arizona Cardinals. He takes over after Kyler Murray leaves. and goes and signs with the Minnesota Vikings. The Arizona Cardinals let him walk, after being their quarterback for the last several years now. He finally gets a fresh start and moves on. Obviously, in Arizona, it did not work out. They made the playoffs to his first year or whatnot, but since then, hasn't been a very good shake for either of them. So they're both moving on, and the Cardinals go ahead and get a guy. And Carson Beck, I mean, he has the potential. This is a guy that's had one of the more interesting college careers we've seen. I mean, he started at Georgia, and he was the guy. He was the guy for like the first couple years, may or may not have won a national championship, but, at Georgia, you're definitely right there every year, year after year. So, he was playing on the biggest stage in the biggest games. And at first, he seemed like a surefire guy. Now, it seems like a long time ago now, but there was a time like 2 years ago where Carson Beck was seen as going to be like the number one overall draft pick, which is crazy thinking about it now that he went number one overall in the third round. But yes, there was a time where Carson Beck was seen as like a top NFL draft pick. And since that time, I mean, a lot happened. I mean, he was at Georgia. He started not playing very well. He started having up and down performance, and then he got injured. And then Georgia kind of said, "Hey, we got a guy behind you that's a baller. We're going to move on." So he goes over to Miami, and then all of a sudden he takes Miami to the playoff. They barely make the playoff, by the way. That's a story in itself, how they slipped into the playoff field, just barely at the hair of their chinny chin. And then they make it all the way to the national championship. Barely got in the playoff, and he leads them all the way to the Natty. Now, for anybody who was watching the playoff, any college football fans out there like me, he definitely was not the reason why Miami went that far. I mean, just look at Ruben Bain, who got drafted first round to the Bucks. Mesidor, who got drafted first round they went to the Dolphins. Yeah, guys like that were why Miami made it so far. But Carson Beck did his thing. He did his thing too. And yes, they basically went on a run through the playoffs. They beat Texas A&M. They beat Ole Miss. Who else they beat? They beat Ohio State. I mean, Miami was just doing it. And then they made it all the way to the Natty. Came up short against Indiana. But Carson Beck was a big reason for their success this past season. And he was able to like resurrect his draft stock. Now, I did talk about it in a different episode some time ago, a different video, about how Carson Beck's draft stock kind of fell off after those bad performances at Georgia and then his injury. And then he kind of was able to resurrect his draft stock a little bit this past season with how well he did at Miami. So I think he went from almost like he literally went from like being the number one overall draft pick possibly to being like almost like seen as undrafted at a certain point, and then going back up to being a third round pick now in this past draft. So, I mean, it's not probably what he had in mind when he was at Georgia going in the third round, but I mean, nevertheless, I mean, he's going to the Cardinals, and he's basically going to be, he's going to have a chance to be the guy. Because, the Cardinals right now, their QB room is looking like Jacoby Brissett and as the starter and Gardner Minshew as the backup. So, two veteran guys that definitely can hold it down. But Carson Beck, he goes early, and he's the third quarterback taken overall in the draft. And, I think he definitely has a chance to be the guy in Arizona if he can translate to the NFL. So shout out to Carson Beck. He definitely had quite a journey, and he falls to Arizona in a good spot. And, after Kyler Murray leaves, he's definitely going to have a chance to be the guy. Moving on to Drew Allar, the fourth quarterback taken in the NFL draft. Drew Allar out of Penn State. A lot of college football fans are familiar with Drew Allar. He has been the Penn State quarterback for the last few years, and he has probably been one of the better Penn State quarterbacks that have come out. They've had some great guys, but most of them have not been able to translate to the NFL level. Guys like Trace McSorley and Christian Hackenberg and, just all kind of guys that have come out of Penn State. Matt McGloin, he had a little bit of success, but Drew Allar, he was seen as probably one of the better college football quarterbacks in the last few years, and he was definitely seen as like a higher draft pick potential this past season. Unfortunately for him, though, Penn State basically just imploded this past year. Again, all my college football fans know that Penn State, who is a, national championship contender year after year after year, no problem at all. This past season, everything just went off the rails. Like, it was a complete dumpster fire for Penn State. They started off being like one of the highest ranked teams in the country. And then they just started losing. And then they kept losing. And they lost again. And they lost again. And they lost again. And they got beat by a 2-win UCLA. And it was like, whoa, like, what is going on? Somehow Penn State still managed to go 6-6 and still made a bowl game. But unfortunately for Drew Allar, he did not get to see the latter part of the season when they won a few games to get back to a bowl game because he got hurt. Probably towards the middle of the year, he got hurt and he was out for the rest of the season. So, and then his NFL draft stock obviously was hurt by that as well. So that was kind of a big reason for why he, falls to the third round. He probably would have went a lot higher if he would have had the same kind of season this past year like he did, the year before. So unfortunately for him, Penn State did not have a good year last season, and then he was injured for the second part of the year. So he falls to the Steelers, which I do like this landing spot for him in Pittsburgh because, I mean, of course, he doesn't even have to leave the state, Pennsylvania, but the Steelers need a quarterback. So I don't know what the Steelers are doing. I don't know what they have been doing for the past couple seasons now. The Steelers, we know the Steelers win enough games year after year that they cannot be like in the top 10 to pick a great quarterback in the draft. So that's really what hurts the Steelers. And they haven't figured out how to do the Packers route where like you find your guy early or in the middle of the round whenever you have like a off year, you know. They haven't been able to have that kind of plan. So on the other side of like what the Packers and the Rams are trying to do, you see the Steelers, like they're just floundering around trying to find out what to do at the quarterback position because they're over here chasing around Aaron Rodgers, who's like 41. Aaron Rodgers is over 40 years old now and doesn't even know if he wants to play football anymore, but that's all the Steelers have. They don't have anything else other than Will Howard, who they drafted last year out of Ohio State. So the Steelers draft Drew Allar, which I like for them because the Steelers, if you're not going to get one of those top college guys, you got to pick somebody. You got to just start throwing darts at the wall because the Steelers don't seem to want to trade for a guy or, you know, sign a big guy in free agency, you know, other than an Aaron Rodgers. But yeah, other than that, like the Steelers need to start drafting guys. So they drafted Will Howard last year, and a lot of people think Will Howard has some potential, won a national championship at Ohio State. And now they get Drew Allar, who is another Big Ten quarterback. So we got a couple Big Ten quarterbacks now. They got Mason Rudolph back, who's been with the Steelers for a couple stints now, and is a veteran holding it down as well. So we're going to see if Aaron Rodgers comes back. They just placed a tag on him saying that he is basically like just off doing it, whatever he's doing, and they don't know what he's doing. That's basically what the tag says. So we'll see if Aaron Rodgers plays again, but I do like the Steelers drafting him in the third round and just, you know, taking a shot at some guys, seeing who sticks. QB number 5 is Cade Klubnik out of Clemson. 6'2", 207. He is a solid quarterback. He had a solid career at Clemson. Obviously, though, Cade Klubnik has kind of been the quarterback that has come after Clemson has fallen off a little bit. College football fans, Clemson has fallen off in the last few years after they had quite a great run, basically being a national championship contending team year after year with guys like Deshaun Watson and Trevor Lawrence. They were right there with Alabama. They made 3 straight national championships, all against Alabama. So, I mean, that tells you what kind of program Clemson was in the past several years. But these past couple seasons, Clemson has fallen off, going from that to being like a team that barely makes a bowl game, you know, going 6-6 and 7-5 these past couple seasons. So that has been Cade Klubnik's experience at Clemson. He did not have the experience that guys before him had, you know, Trevor Lawrence's and guys like that. So, and Cade Klubnik himself, you know, he was one of the top ranked quarterbacks coming out of high school, but in college, it has not gone as well as most would think. Now, he is a very solid quarterback and he had a solid career, but it never really hit the potential that, you know, that people were giving him coming out of high school going to Clemson, especially with how Clemson, you know, had performed the years before he got there. So he falls to the 4th round and he goes to the New York Jets, which I do like the Jets picking a quarterback taking a shot at one because the Jets obviously are trying to figure out that position more than most teams are. So they tried with Justin Fields this past season and it didn't work out. So Justin Fields moves on and they signed Geno Smith. Well, they traded for him from the Raiders. So, the Geno Smith is already coming off a bad year himself with Las Vegas. I keep saying Oakland. They traded for him and he comes over to the Jets, which, I don't think is going to go any better for him. I talked about that in our last episode. So, Geno Smith is kind of just going to be the bridge guy probably for next season when the Jets draft a guy higher than they did this year. But this year they take a shot at Kate Klubnik. They get him in the 4th round. And I like it for them because if Kate Klubnik can turn out to have something, then, there you go. And then you have a guy anyway when you get ready to draft a guy maybe next year. So they got him and they got Bailey Zappi, who used to be a backup on the Patriots. And they also have Brady Cook, who they drafted last year out of Missouri. So, interesting QB room for them. They got a couple young guys, got Bailey Zappi back there, and then they got the veteran Geno Smith leading it. So the Jets, obviously will probably have another bad year this next season, but, the QB situation is very interesting. And you see if Kate Klubnik can prove to be the guy.